everybody. We'll get started. I'd like to introduce our presenters today. Lovely City of Reno folks. We got Angela and Chris here. I'll let them tell them about themselves and what they're talking about today. But my name is Jeff Workhart. I'm the Infrastructure and Planning Chair. We also have Fred Simon here, who's the Northern Nevada Section Director of the Northern Nevada American Planning Association, with a long title. Close enough. But we're doing joint workshops. I think this is our last for a little bit of time. We hope to keep these back off again after our state conference. And Fred, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about our state conference before we introduce Angela and Chris.
Just again, on behalf of the American Planning Association Nevada chapter, and specifically the northern section, my sincere thanks to all of you being here in the room today, as well as those that are participating virtually via Zoom. Because we are recording this session, in terms of quick housekeeping, just make sure that your phones are in the silent position, as we'll take the video from today's presentation from the City of Reno and make it available through the chapter's YouTube channel. Also wanted to, again, extend a huge thanks to the Builders Association of Northern Nevada, specifically Jeff for all his hard work in helping organize these sessions. And I think Erin sneaked out quickly, but I definitely want to thank Erin just because she's put in a ton of work in helping organize the room. Erin, take a bow. Association is also super gracious in terms of the food, the water, the chicks, utilization of the hall. Could not do this without the Builders Association of Northern Nevada. So again, huge thanks to the organization, to Jeff and Aaron. As Jeff mentioned, this particular workshop session today is again part of an ongoing series that the chapter Northern Section and BAN have been running since March, really focused on issues and topics pertaining to growth in our region and how various public agencies, private sector firms, and various even nonprofit community-based organizations are tackling various issues related to growth. This is going to be our last actual educational session for at least the next month and a half, as the chapter, in partnership with Nevada ASLA and BAN as well, are going to be kicking off Jane Jacobs Month for the month of May. That will begin on Saturday, May 6th from, I think, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. At the University of Nevada, Reno at the Joe Crowley Student Union, where we will have a presentation from one of our both vice provosts talking about the University Gateway project and how the university is planning that kind of no man's land between the main campus and the downtown core, working with a variety of public agencies and private sector firms, and even some, again, community-based organizations. That presentation will be followed by a screening of the Jane Jacobs film, Citizen Jane. And then for all of you that are able to attend and participate, we'll have a reception out on the Joe Crowley patio up at the Joe Crowley Student Union. Of course, we'll make sure that you get all that information. And then throughout the month of May, we'll be doing a whole series of walking tours of downtown Reno, Midtown Sparks, and a few events also partnered with Nevada ASLA. And of course, BAN, again, we'll make sure you get all that information. We'll probably finish up this series for a little bit in June. We've kept around the idea of doing kind of an expanded infrastructure half-day event in partnership with the Nevada Department of Business and Industry, the Nevada Department of Transportation, the Nevada Governor's Office of Economic Development. Of course, no cost to you for any of these events, and we'll certainly make sure that you get that information. And then we're really going to take a break because we have our state APA Nevada chapter annual conference October 16th through the 18th at the brand new Tahoe Event Center in State Line, South Lake Tahoe, again, October 16th through 18th. Again, we'll make sure that all of you get invitations to that. We're going to be the very first group into the brand new event center up at the lake. So it should be a great conference, and hope to have you all there. And then we'll probably finish out the year after the state conference with 1 or 2 more educational sessions. And we'll have a party in December and then enjoy the holiday season. So again, on behalf of the chapter and the northern section in particular. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to our speakers from the city of Reno. And I will kick it back to Jeff and get you started.
And before I turn it over to these lovely guys, I'm gonna bug all of you guys for sponsorships for the state conference. So expect calls. All right, I'll turn it over to Chris and Angela. Thanks, guys.
Hi, I'm Chris Pingree. Thanks for having us today. I'm with our Development Services Department, which was pretty recently rebranded from our Community Development Department into a smaller, more robust group of folks just doing planning, engineering, and building responsibilities within the city. So today we've got a presentation today that Angela and most of you all obviously know Angela Fuss, but those of you who don't know Grace McAdon, these two are the lifeblood of our planning department. And really the keys to us moving forward and really working with the industry to make sure that we're doing what we haven't done in the past, which is the transparency, notifying you guys of what we're doing, how we're doing it. Bobby, I'm so glad I said that before I saw you today. So I'm glad to see everybody here. So again, we appreciate your guys' time. We enjoy these road shows that we've been doing. We've been reaching out to the local development community to do in-house road shows at your offices as well. If anybody's ever interested in that and needs more information from the city of Reno, we are more than willing to show up at your office, and all you have to do is give us a bottle of water and we will give out as much information as you need. So if you need anything from us, obviously our contact information, I'll leave some business cards here, but if you ever need anything from us, please feel free to reach out and we will do our best to accommodate any needs from the development community in the whole. So if there's any questions or anything, I want to continue to move forward. It is here to for the presentation.
Great. We were asked to come give you an update on our zoning code. We would like to give you a little bit more history of where we've been since we adopted our code 2 years ago and kind of where we're going. So let's kind of start with why we updated the code 2 years ago. Right? This really started back after we adopted our new master plan. That was in 2017. So we thought this great document and said, here's all the goals and the policies, all the different questions, how we want to grow, where we want to grow, what we want that to look like. And it's like every master plan, right? We want walkable communities, we want parks, we want open space. But then how do we actually implement that? How do we make that happen? And that's where the zoning code really comes into play. So back in 2018, they hired the city of Reno hired a consultant, Clarion, and said, help us fix our zoning code to be in more alignment with that master plan that we just adopted. So this was a 3-year process. And we had a technical advisory committee. We had quite a few changes in staff at that time. So I will say it went from maybe one person's vision through maybe 3 more individuals' visions. But at the end of the day, we ended up with a really good document. Right? So let's talk about some of the good things that came out of our code cleanup or code adoption. So one of them, do you guys all remember that the TOD designation? Right? This is something we implemented probably 20 years ago. And I'd like to think it was kind of a big picture, right? We said South Virginia Street to North Virginia Street, we said 4th Street. That's where we wanted to see density and development and mixed use. So show of hands, right? How many of you think we've achieved that on Virginia Street? You're going to say, is there density? Is it walkable? Would you take the bus?
Accurate.
Right? Probably not the TOD type of development that we all envision as being like cool, right? It's just more of like, okay, so we said we wanted these things, but what have we done to actually try and get those things? And so with the code update back in 2021, we got rid of that TOD nomenclature and we call it mixed use. So from many perspectives, like TOD is a thing, but mixed use is really kind of the new thing. Mixed use can be anything from horizontal mixed use, meaning we go up with a different type of uses. Maybe you have residential on top and retail and commercial on the bottom, or you can be vertical mixed use, meaning we have a lot more density spread out. So one of the big changes from the old code to the new code is we got rid of those TOD overlay districts and we changed the document use. We also did a lot with our development standards, and this is everything, right, within our code. So within parking, for instance, we said, let's really take a look at our parking standards. And if we're trying to encourage mixed use and density, maybe we should look at where we require parking and not require it anymore. So a lot of the downtown, parking's not required, right? Let the market dictate what the parking standards are. So this was all implemented as part of the new code. Setbacks, we looked at our zoning districts and said, well, what should the setbacks be? You know, instead of a 10-foot side setback, maybe we should have a 0-foot side setback. And with the front, right? Instead of requiring a bunch of frontage, maybe we just say, put your building on the 0 property line. So all that was looked at. We revised it, updated it into the new code. And then we just made it a code that was easier to read. One of the challenges with our old code is very long. I think it's about 1,200 pages, which is ridiculous. Like that's like reading War and Peace, but it's technical. Like nobody's reading 1,200 pages of the zoning code. So we condensed it. It's more like 750 pages. We also put in a lot of graphics, just making it easier to read, and tables. And so tables and charts, I will say, super technical, but so much easier to understand and read when you actually have something that is pretty to look at. So that was a big improvement and just more user-friendly for the average person trying to read your code. One of the big complaints we heard over and over was Reno doesn't have a lot of flexibility. So we added more flexibility. We came up with all these new types of kind of allowances, right? New procedures that you can do. So for instance, we've always had minor deviations. So if you want to deviate by that 10%, like, oh, you know, my setback is 10 feet, minor deviation, you can deviate 10%, so like 1 foot. What if we expanded that and said major deviation up to 50%? Different from a variance, because a variance, you have to go to planning commission, you have to prove there's a hardship. And it's really hard to prove a hardship unless it's like, oh, my project is really it's really steep, right? So we came up with this major deviation, which Sparks already had, and it seemed to work. So great, new tool. We also came up with this alternative equivalent compliance, meaning if there's something on your site that you can't make work, and you think, well, from a design perspective, the code sucks, and I'm trying to do something better. You would use this tool, alternative equivalent compliance. So landscaping is one of those where maybe our code says you have to have a 10-foot landscape buffer between you and the site next to you. And you're like, well, for what purpose, right? Maybe I want to do a 5-foot and a 10-foot, and I'm going to make it better. I'm going to have more dense landscaping to really protect the neighbors. You would use that tool. So that one's very good. That does require planning commission approval, so it's still a 3-month process, but at least that tool is now in our zoning code. And we divided conditional use permits and site plan reviews. Again, 2 things that used to have to go to planning commission. Now we've created kind of another tool that's more of a 30-day review. You don't have to go to planning commission if it's a minor version of that. So again, just giving you guys more tools that doesn't require 3 months, time, money, and uncertainty in going to the planning commission. And then one of the other ones is the specific plan district. And this is something that I think in theory we really like. It's the idea that you can take a single parcel, let's just say a 2-acre parcel, and say, I know it's zoned for this use, for these standards, but that doesn't work for my project. So I'm going to create this specific plan district, almost like a planned unit development, but for a tiny parcel, and make it work for my specific use. So a great example, we have a 24-hour fitness in Northwest Reno. It's been there a long time and it shut down. What do you do with the 24-hour fitness? Not much, right? It's there. You can turn it into another gym. What else can we do with it? So Coral Academy came along and said, I could use this building, this site for a school. We said, oh, that would be great. Reuse, right? The building, you like that idea. But you know, schools are not allowed in that zoning district. So you have to go back and change the zoning, and that's not going to work for these 10 other reasons. So they created this SPD, separate kind of zoning category that allows them to have a school in that 24-hour fitness building. It's great in terms of lots of space for parking, lots of space for cars to come in, drop their kids off and leave. So that's been a really good tool. I think some of the challenges we've had with that is that sometimes council feels that if they don't like a project, everything should be an SPD. Can you imagine if every parcel was an SPD? It would be a nightmare, right? Like you don't want every parcel to have its own specific zoning requirements. And it really should be something that's unique and special, but not for everything. So we're working on, I think, more just educating ourselves, our staff, and our council on the use of that SPD tool. So since then, that was adopted in 2021. What changes have we made? These were probably, the 4 highlights of the zoning code. Adult business. You guys all know what that is? Susie's. Where should we allow Susie's? We had to go back and update our code on where we allow adult type businesses. Same with packaged alcohol. So Fireball is a great example. If you want to go buy packaged alcohol, we have regulations on where you can buy that. Of course, you can go to Smith's or Rayleigh's and buy that. But what about all the little markets and the little convenience stores? What are the rules on that? There was a time when council said, well, we have these mini markets throughout the city. And that's really a prime location where people are like shopping for groceries, right? People that don't have access to cars are going to these mini markets, and that's where they're doing their grocery shopping. So let's put in some rules that if you're going to sell packaged alcohol, you should also require that you have to have fresh food. So fruit, vegetables, not Twinkies and hard-boiled eggs. So like legitimate food, knowing that people in these areas don't have access to vehicles and don't have access to grocery stores. So we changed the rules and said if you're going to sell packaged alcohol in these convenience stores, in these mini marts, you also have to have fresh food. And then cannabis. So we are allowed a certain number of cannabis establishments throughout the city. And so we just found some nuances that were in our old code that we did not update correctly in the new code. So we fixed that. And then live entertainment. So that is things like if I'm going to a bar and they're playing music, we call that live entertainment, right? That's not the adult business side of live entertainment. This is truly music, nightclub dancing. So we had to make some changes. DJ trivia, you guys saw in the news, this is probably a year ago. We had a bunch of regulations on where we allow DJ trivia. So you just go to a bar, you go to Bowley's and you play some trivia and you're out by 10 o'clock. We called that live entertainment and we had all these regulations on where DJ trivia could go, which seems silly. We should be encouraging DJ trivia, especially after COVID, right? Nobody was going out. But then DJ trivia was happening, it was encouraging people to go out. Anyway, so we made those changes and we updated the code and council approved those changes. So that's where we've been in the last 2 years. Let's talk about now where we're going next. There we go. So we really have two different categories of our zoning code. One is what we're calling our zoning code cleanup. So we adopted the code 2 years ago, and since then, we've been keeping a list. Staff has been keeping a list of things that we found that like are spelled wrong or conflicting with each other, just don't make sense. Separate from that, we have a list that City Council has prioritized, right? There was a list of things that we said, at some point we need to get to these things. We're just not going to do it with the zoning code that we adopted in 2021. So things like our major drainage ordinance. These are big technical things. We really need to spend more time, have a technical advisory committee, really look at the technical things and then update our code. So I'm going to separate today's discussion into those two categories. Let's start with the first one then, zoning code cleanup. So I would summarize the things that we found in our existing code as kind of four big things. One is grammatical, basic, right? Every code has the grammatical things. You give a list and you clean them up. Inconsistency. So this is a big one. Let's say we have a section that says your setback is 5 feet. And then we have another section that says your setback is 10 feet, right? Those would be inconsistencies. We need to clean those up. And then unintended changes. So we got rid of a lot of our zone categories, like all those mixed use TOD categories. We took out TOD and we're now called something else. But we may have forgotten to update some of those to say what the landscape requirements are. So we have entire sections of our city where there's no landscape requirements. Oops, right, we just missed it, unintended consequences. We have entire sections of our city that there are no sign regulations. So you technically can't have a sign because we didn't give you some regulations. So we forgot to do some of those things, we just missed it. And then the bigger items, the items that looking back, we're like, oh, we totally missed the boat on that. Not sure how we missed that, but we're going to fix that. So we're going to call those bigger items. So some of these, well, we as staff call them hidden Easter eggs. There's a joke like, can you hide your own Easter eggs? Like, we can hide our own Easter eggs. So if you look through our document, right, 700 pages of good technical information, it's just these random things. You're like, why did we put that in there? So here's just a couple random examples. We have a section. So if you're zoned for parks, greenways, and open space, it's like an open space zoning. and you put a park there. Great, that's where we want parks. We have regulations, you gotta make sure you protect the neighbors from lights, protect the neighbors from noise. But we have a section that says, if you have lights in your parking lot taller than 3 feet, you trigger a site plan review. And have you ever been to a parking lot where the lights are 3 feet? Why? Why would we put that in there? So pretty much every single park that's zoned, parks, greenways, and open space, has to go through site plan review because they have a parking lot with lights taller than 3 feet. Silly things that, like, I don't know why we put that in there, but that needs to go away. So we're gonna delete some of those things. Another one as an example. If you are zoned multifamily and you are next to residentially zoned property, okay, there's a lot of that, and you trigger a conditional use permit, your setback just went from 5 feet to 20 feet on the side, which makes no sense. Only if those things are in place, right? Zone multifamily, next door to single family zoning, and you trigger a conditional use permit. Your setback just got bigger by 15 feet. Why? Makes no sense. So if you don't trigger a conditional use permit, is your setback still 20 feet? According to our code, no. So again, stupid thing, makes no sense, not sure why we did that. That's going away. So we have a lot of hidden Easter eggs in our zoning code that as staff, we've picked up accidentally, like, oops, why did we do that? So as part of this code cleanup, we're gonna just delete some of those that make no sense. Or if they make sense, then make it a bigger issue, right? Like if we need multifamily next to single family, to have a 20-foot side setback, and make that the setback. Period. All right, this is another big one. Sidewalks and parkway strips. For any of you that do single family subdivision development, you've seen our code over the years. You know, we've kind of gone up and down on where we require parkway strips. And I will say, when you go to other cities, Reno's cool, but when you go to other places, how are they designed? And they have wide sidewalks, so you can walk a dog and have a baby stroller and cross somebody, right? It's not hard to walk on a sidewalk with 2 people. In Reno, it can be hard to walk on a sidewalk with 2 people. I mean, take Midtown. Before they redid Midtown, you had a 3-foot sidewalk in places, and you had a big light pole in the middle. So like that was a horrible design, but they fixed it. It's so much better. So what if we could fix the rest of the city in terms of where we require sidewalks and parking strips? So we hired a consultant, Fair and Pierce. We said, pick 5 cities that you think are awesome cities. We looked at like Boise, we looked at Spokane, Salem, Oregon. Where else did we look? Really important 5 cities, so we can't remember right now. But we said, what do they require? And so they did the study for us, and they came up with, it's not based on what your zoning is, right? Our current zoning code says where you have sidewalks and parkway strips should be based on your zoning, which makes no sense here. They said that's bad. That is not a good way to do that. Do it based on your road classification. So if you have a design next to on a local road or a residential road, you should have one set of standards for how wide the sidewalk should be. If you're in a downtown, you should have a different set of standards for how wide the sidewalk should be and where you require parking strips. So one big change, that I don't know we're going to get the builders in support of and understand why, is that we are going to require parking strips and wider sidewalks throughout the entire city. We are going to have some allowances for if you're in an infill area, right? If you're tying into an area that has a 3-foot sidewalk, should we make you put in 6-foot wide sidewalk plus a 6-foot wide parkway strip? Probably not. It doesn't fit. But generally speaking, our master plan says we want walkable communities. We want pretty communities. We want shaded communities. So this will help us to get there. Know that that's new and that's coming. And again, something that we've been working on, but we haven't implemented very well in the past couple of years. So we really want to focus on that. Residential compatibility. So if you watch any of our city council meetings on appeals, one of the big issues we hear over and over is compatibility with residential development. We had a project recently, it was 5 units, townhomes in an infill area. This is where we want infill, right? And multi-family zoning district. This is where we said we wanted density in infill. Council denied it. 5 townhome units because they didn't feel it was compatible with the neighborhood. How do we fix this? Right? As planners, as professional planners that like truly want to see cool projects, want to see infill, how do we fix this? So what we'd like to do is have certain projects that maybe right now trigger an entitlement, right? Go straight to a building permit. But in return for that, we're going to have stricter requirements on that compatibility issue. So for instance, if you have a multifamily project that doesn't trigger a conditional use permit, next door to single family, you have a 5-foot side setback. So you can go 3 stories next to 1 story with a 5-foot side setback. That provides no protection for that single family home next door. And I think that's the concern that our council is hearing is it's not really compatible. 3 stories next to 1 story with 5 feet separation. So what we'd like to do is say those types of projects can go straight to a building permit. But in exchange, we're going to ask for more from the designers than a 5-foot setback. So we'd like to put in kind of a list of options. And maybe we say, here's 10 options to choose from, whether it's bigger setbacks, meaning the building from the property line, or wider step backs, meaning the 2nd floor and the 3rd floor are pushed back more. Maybe we put in some landscape requirements instead of 1 tree every 30 feet, which is nothing. I mean, truly, 1 tree every 30 feet, that provides no protection for those neighbors, right? Put in some truly density in terms of landscaping to protect those neighbors from having to look at a 3-story building next door. So we're going to come up with some ideas. Like I said, we're going to come up with hopefully like 7 to 10 options of things you as designers can do to incorporate into your project. And you have to pick a certain number of them. And then in exchange, the idea would be go straight to a building permit. You avoid the 3-month public hearing process. You're looking confused.
Me?
Yeah.
No, I understand.
You're looking skeptical.
Perfect sense. Biology's a bother with me.
What you're saying is you're in support.
Yes. And again, understanding that what we hear is council wants one thing, and what we hear is the development community wants another. So we're trying to marry those two to make everybody happy. All right, industrial development. This is another big one that we as planning staff struggle with. So North Valley in particular has a lot of industrial development literally next door to single family homes. Now, in any sense of what's acceptable, do any of us think that's a good idea? Probably not, right? Nobody wants to live next door to trucks coming in 24 hours a day, beeping, backing up. Nobody. I can't think of anyone that would say that's a good idea. However, there are things we can do to better mitigate those issues. So what we would like to do is really take a look at industrial development standards. And instead of requiring a conditional use permit for all these things, put in some must-haves. So when you have an industrial building and you have those truck loading doors, those dock doors, 50 feet away from somebody's backyard, is that the best location for trucks to be backing up, beeping? Probably not. So let's put in some standards that say, if you want to have industrial next door to residential, maybe we say no dock doors in face the residential. Right now, we say you have to screen it, which means 1 tree every 30 feet, which again does nothing to protect the people living in those homes. We have people crying, literally crying, because they can't sleep, because the trucks are operating 24/7, 300 feet from them, and they're backing up and beeping. And for people, this is a major problem. And we're not the only one that has this problem, right? Communities all over the nation have this problem. So we're taking a hard look and saying, let's just create some standards that make sense so that everyone has to live by the same rules. And it doesn't matter which planner gets your case, you're going to get the same set of rules. Yeah.
How exactly do you do that in North Valleys? You got these huge buildings.
Yeah.
Next to tons of manufactured homes. There are most likely rentals in that area.
Uh-huh.
So you're going to impede the growth of all the money coming into the area by the offset of a single mobile home,
No. So what we're saying is it has to do with the design of your building,
right?
right? Can you design this building differently?
Yeah, but like in Sparks, when they were widening all crossroads on Pyramid and Pyramid. They just eminent domain, basically streets, paid out everybody, moved everybody around, whether you're a renter or you're a homeowner, because the growth was inevitable in regards to a lot of people moving out. I mean, it just looks crazy up in the North Valleys. I've never seen anything like it. And it's, like you said, a four-story building next to a 1970 manufactured home.
And it's single-family homes built 10 years ago. I mean, it's everything, right? It's not just the homes that have been there for 50 years. It's the homes that have been there recently. A lot of those homes were approved in Washoe County, and we, as a city, are abutting next to them. But again, what we'd like to do is say, how do we make sure that lighting is not an issue for them? How do we make sure that noise is mitigated? So at 2 a.m. in the morning, do we have truck traffic coming on that side of the building? How about if we just require that truck traffic doesn't come on that side of the building that's next to those homes, right? Are those the type of things that we can do to help protect those?
So to back up that, if the zoning standards change, would that only affect future warehouses or industrial that were built and not the ones that are already there? Or
Correct.
was those, okay, so it wouldn't cause like a design change for the already existing?
Correct. Nope, you're grandfathered in. You're approved, you're built, you're forever there. Any new development coming in, you have to follow whatever standards in place at the time.
In regards to where it is, like near residential.
Uh-huh.
Right, okay.
Yep, and so we've had probably, 5 or 6 in the last year that have been pretty contentious. They're ones that have either come in for new development and gone through city council reviews because they were appealed, or ones that were built. Maybe they were approved 5 years ago, and now they're built and in use, and the neighbors are 300 feet away, which is, that's a long ways. But they send us videos of the noise and the lights. It's crazy. I mean, I can't imagine having to live 300 feet even from those industrial developments that's 24/7 beeping and backing and the forklifts. I mean, it's a challenge.
So what are we doing for those homeowners?
Today, the ones that are approved today, there's not a whole lot we can do. We work with the property owners to talk about lights. Can we reduce the lights, right? All the lights have to be shielded in dark skies, but what can we do to work with the property owners of the industrial buildings? We're doing a lot with just code enforcement. You know, if they have beeping going off in the middle of the night, our code enforcement's out there, our staff's out there at 2 a.m. taking measures of the noise and citing and saying, you're exceeding noise levels, you have to do something to change the way you operate.
It just seems like the growth is being repeated still. Remind you, my house is my sanctuary, right? But if the direction of your department is to plan the inevitable growth of a city for people moving in, police, fire, and all that stuff, there has to be an offset of how much money it's costing to offset very small margin position. Few houses now in the middle of all of those big giant warehouses. It just seems kind of, again, it's like worrying about a gnat as the whale comes through your neighborhood.
Yep. And I will say this is a priority from our city council. So we take direction from them. This is something they get a lot of complaints on. If you've looked at our agendas, we have a lot of our zone change agenda items about industrial development, literally next door to industrial development. So how do we better fix that situation? Instead of saying no to industrial development, what if we just mitigate those impacts of noise, lights, truck traffic, and hours of operation? Those are the big things that we see. We're never going to solve the problem, but how do we make it better, right? Kyle?
Yeah, I just was curious, did you guys look at like how much, I'm just wondering how much of the industrial zone property has already been developed as like opposed to how much of that residential adjacency do you have left in those areas? Like how much of an impact is this gonna make, I guess? And like, you know, are we a little too late, I guess is the question on that.
I'd say no. I mean, we deal with zone changes all the time. Tampa Valley's a big one that's happening right now. We've had just this recent intake we have right now where they're proposing industrial next to large lot residential. We say yes to that. What measures are in place to protect those homes? We have a zoning code that says, here's the standards. those neighbors would know ahead of time, like, cool, you're gonna rezone the property next to me industrial. Here's at least the guarantees that I know, because I lived here first, right? That the city will enforce. Those are the kind of things we're trying to protect.
Angela, if I can for a second, we only have about 45 minutes left and want to make sure that our
Okay, that's fine.
presenters have time. If you can, however, just hold on to your questions until after the presentation, and then we'll circle back to Q&A, just because we also have questions waiting from the online people as well.
Okay, so
Just
we're gonna
throw
go
your
with that.
question down.
Yeah, again, something that has been a problem in Reno for a long time. I think COVID really heightened the problem because development went from normal level of industrial development to industrial is where it's at. Like the amount of industrial development we saw through COVID was insane. And I think that's because everybody was shopping online. All right, so, oops. Another big item that we hear a lot of complaints about, is gosh darn. Oh. You have the ability to control it on your end.
We're there.
That one. Okay, so stockpiling, something that most of you probably don't know about, don't care about, not your thing. We get complaints constantly on our stockpiling permit requirements. So any of you that have ever had to stockpile, know that you can go to any other city and you submit a permit and you say, this is where I want to move a bunch of dirt for a temporary purpose. And then when I'm building my project, I'll put that dirt back and we do that. Reno's stockpiling regulations are very complicated. Depends on what you're zoned. We have different regulations depending on what you're zoned. We have different regulations on how long you can stockpile based on what you're zoned. We also require public noticing, so you actually have to go out and like notify your neighbors if you're going to put some dirt on this site for a while. That's not normal. And so because we've had so many complaints from the industry as a whole, that we've said, this is a high priority for us. Let's clean this up. Let's try and find some kind of best practices that the rest of the world uses for stockpiling and not make it so complicated, right? Stockpiling is kind of a necessary evil. Nobody wants to see a bunch of dirt piled on a site, but you have to have it. When there's construction, this is just what has to happen. So how do we make this easier for you guys to process, easier for us to review, and just make it smoother and faster? And then when we adopted our new code 2 years ago, we put in these great tables, again, much easier to understand and easier to read. But there's some things I was like, why? Again, hidden Easter eggs, why? So for instance, a lot of our zoning districts have a maximum height, right? You can go up to, let's say, 35 feet in certain zoning districts. But we also have a maximum number of stories. So typically stories are whole numbers. 1 story, 2 story, 3 story. Then we have 2.5 stories. So I don't really know why. Why? Where's why?
And a half story is not defined. That's what makes it.
Don't do a good job of defining what that means. So that's one of those just hidden Easter eggs. I don't know why we did that, but let's clean that up. We even need to have a number of stories. If height is a requirement, then that's the requirement. So we're going to clean that up. The other one is just setbacks. So again, so like these great, beautiful tables identify here's your zoning district, here's what your setbacks are. But then here's 5 other sections of our code you have to look at to really understand what your setbacks are. Like, no, here's your setbacks, period, black and white. So we want to delete all this other stuff and say, this is your setback. Yes. All right, so that was kind of category 1, right? Zoning code cleanup. We have 400 items that staff has identified that needs to be fixed. 400, like repeat with me, 1, 2, 3, 400. It's a big number, it's overwhelming. How did we mess up so much? I don't know. 400 cleanup items. Those are some of the bigger picture ones.
You can blame me, it's fine.
Second category of things that we're working on is what's called city council priorities. So back in 2021, so again, this was April of 2021, so 2 years ago, we went to council and we said, what are some of the big ticket items that you guys want us to fix in our zoning code? And this is the list they came up with. So affordable housing, of course, is at the forefront of everything. And that's everything from ADUs, right? Accessory dwelling units. Great topic. to allowing for like more density for affordable housing, to allow for fee reductions for affordable housing, all those things kind of encompassed in that category. So let's go through each of these and I will tell you where we're at on updating each of these. So number one, everything in red are things that we want to incorporate in as part of that list of 400 things that we're cleaning up in the zoning code. Affordable housing. We've had a couple workshops with our council on things we could do today, right now, in our zoning code to help with the affordable housing situation in terms of subsidized affordable housing. So we gave them some ideas and said, yep, go forth and do it. So we're going to incorporate that into our zoning code. Sustainability. This is a really hot topic. It's kind of a buzzword, and I think everybody has a different definition of what sustainability means. When we did a code update 2 years ago, we had a whole chapter designated to sustainability. And at one time it was going to be 15 pages of a checklist. So every development that came in, if you can show which of these sustainability things you're incorporating, you get certain points. And we said, whoa, this is a whole lot. What are we getting in return? So council at that time said, let's take that section of the code out. It's not really vetted yet. Let's consider that at a future time. So at this point, we're not moving forward with that concept, that checklist concept. We're trying to just come up with some zoning code standards that allow for you guys to do things that are more sustainable. Like just a simple, easy one to talk about is multifamily development. So if you build an apartment project in Reno, you're required to show kind of like what amenities are you contributing, like a little tot lot or a barbecue area or some bocce ball, right? You have some kind of amenity. We don't have on there now anything about like rooftop gardens. Like nobody in Reno does rooftop gardens, probably because it's expensive and structurally it changes the dynamic. But those are the kind of things we can say as an option. If instead of a bocce ball court, you wanted to incorporate a rooftop garden, that's something you can do. You can do that in exchange for that bocce ball court. So we're trying to make it more of incentives for you guys as developers and your clients to do things that are sustainable rather than us mandating that you do things that are more sustainable. E-charging stations, that's one right now that is kind of a hot topic. Our current zoning code does not require that you guys put in EV charging stations. Many of you guys choose to do that with your projects, which is great, but we're not requiring it. As the building code, so that's a separate building code ordinance, as that's being updated, we are anticipating they're going to have requirements for EV charging stations. So from a zoning perspective, we don't want to double dip, right? If the building code says, here's the new requirement, great, then you'll have to do it according to building code. From the zoning perspective, you do it, we're happy that you do it, we're not going to mandate that you do it. Those types of things. Historic preservation, we have a whole chapter in our zoning code on historic preservation. What we're proposing to do is just clean that up. There's some things that just don't make sense, things that just aren't really implementable, that's the word, things that we can't implement as staff. So it's from our perspective, let's go back and just clean those things up and make it more realistic in terms of how we deal with historic preservation. One thing that's I think interesting, so we have a city historic list, right? So there's projects, properties that are on our historic preservation list that are protected. We have about 16 houses or buildings. That's it. For the entire city of Reno, only 16 parcels are on our historic preservation list. We still have like the national preservation list and the state preservation list, but as a city, we only have 16. So we have this whole chapter dedicated to historic preservation for 16 parcels. That could someday hopefully be better, right? I think that's something this whole community would like to see. But from a zoning perspective, we're just going to clean up what we have now, and then at a future time work on really making a more robust preservation program. And then residential compatibility, that was a high priority for our city council. So again, we've come up with some ideas just to make it more a list of options for you guys to choose. We're not going to mandate that you do things. You come to us and tell us, here's the things that you said will work for your project. So it gives you guys more flexibility to really fit in the community rather than our council happy to say, I like it or don't like it, not necessarily based on something. So those are the kind of 4 things that we're doing as part of the code cleanup that we can take off this list. Turn it again. There we go. One more. Okay, so other items. So we have hired a consultant, White and Smith. They are out of the Midwest. And we've asked them to take the lead on these three categories. So signs. Our sign ordinance is outdated. It has been band-aided many, many times. But it's not necessarily consistent in how we review it. Like our staff kind of goes back and forth. What does that mean? What does that mean? So depending on who you ask, you get a different answer. That's not okay. We have to have one set of standards that we all understand. But because signs are also very litigious, we get sued quite a bit on our sign ordinance. And so we want to stop that. Scenic Nevada, I think, eats us for lunch. I mean, they find all kinds of things that we do that don't meet their idea of what we should be doing. So we've hired a consultant to help us with rewriting our sign ordinance. The telecommunications, nobody really cares about telecommunications. Nobody even knows what that means. It's cell towers, right? It's a must have. Every community must have an ordinance on cell towers. Otherwise, we wouldn't have cell phones. So our telecommunication ordinance is definitely outdated and is not up to speed with current federal regulations. So we've hired a consultant to help us rewrite that. Again, won't have a big impact on the day-to-day work of what you guys all do. Just know that we're going to make it better. And then appeals and procedures. So this is a fun one for Reno. We did a little comparison on how many appeals got brought up to our city council compared to other jurisdictions. The last 3 years or so, Sparks has, I think, they've had 1 or 2 appeal projects that went to their city council. Reno has had over 30 appeal projects that went to their city council. So we get appealed on everything: building permits, sign permits, planning cases, infill projects. It's really quite extensive. And is there a way to better fix that? I think part of the problem is that, you know, if the neighbors don't like something, they appeal it. Well, how do we fix that, right? How do we make projects more acceptable to those neighbors? I'm hoping with some of these residential compatibility standards, it will make it easier for neighbors to say, I'm okay with that project coming into my neighborhood. And we also just want to have better understanding of who has standing. So if you don't like a project and you live in Carson City, do you have the right to appeal it to the Reno City Council? Should you have the right to appeal it to the Reno City Council? So those are the kinds of questions that we're asking. And again, we've hired a consultant because I don't want to touch this topic. Let's bring in somebody that can talk about, from a state law perspective, what are the rules and regulations, and from a best practices perspective, what are other communities doing related to those? Yeah.
Is there a threshold to do the appeal process?
Today?
Yeah.
Anyone can appeal
Yeah, so
anything for any reason.
I represented an apartment project that was sandwiched between the Smiths and the North Valley, right next to the school. One person appealed it.
Yeah.
Happens all the time.
Yep. And part of it, we brought this to council, is our fees, right? To apply for an appeal, you submit an application and you submit $55. When we looked at other jurisdictions, we were by far the lowest. The next highest level up, closest to us, was $250. And it went up from there. So like $55 is nothing. You gotta have some skin in the game, right? Like how important is this to you? So some jurisdictions charge several $1,000s to file an appeal, which does seem a little high, but is there a happy medium, right? We've also talked about like an hourly rate. Some jurisdictions charge an hourly rate. How much staff time goes into an appeal? We calculated just the easiest, most basic appeal from planning commission to city council. It's about 20 hours, right? Somebody has to do the noticing. Somebody has to write a staff report. Then we have about 3 levels of people that have to review a staff report. There's many, many things that go into even the most basic appeal. So 20 hours of different staff time is a lot of staff time. $55 does nothing to cover that. So we're trying to find a better balance of what are some best practices that we can start to implement. So those are the ones, again, that the consultant is helping us with today. Other things on the list that we want to hire a consultant and not do ourselves is short-term rentals, and that is a tough topic. That's the Airbnbs and the Washoe County went through a short-term rental ordinance recently, and it's a nightmare for them to administer. I think it was, most of that's incline, right, because Washington County stretches out to incline. But I think lessons learned through them is that we need to hire somebody who knows what they're doing to help us write the short-term rental ordinance. And it may mean that we have to hire more staff to actually implement that short-term rental ordinance. So future time down the road, not happening this calendar year, is short-term rentals. And then the last kind of remaining items are things that are actually kind of in process, but maybe with other departments. So smoke-free business, one of our council members put that on their list of priorities. I'm not sure that we even need that. State law dictates where and when you allow businesses to smoke indoors and not out and not. So I'm not sure from a zoning perspective, we even want to touch that. Flood hazard, we're going to be working with our public works department. That's really their kind of specialty, their bailiwick. So we're going to take the lead from them on any changes to our flood hazard regulations. Major drainage ways, that's another one where I think over the years, we've done some really good drainage ways and we've done some not so good drainage ways. So, you can look North Valley is probably the area with the most major drainage ways. We'd like to protect the ones that are there now, but we understand that like development happens as well. And so when you have a major drainage way going through both a railroad and 395, and then the city tells you, yeah, but that's an important one you need to protect. Like, you kind of get pushback from the development community. So we're trying to find that happy balance between like, how do we protect drainage ways, but also understand that development is happening in these areas. And then that last one is the urban interface for wildlife safety. So when you have development on the fringe of town, we have a lot of new development, like Bird Eye is a great area. We've got probably 3,000 homes that have been approved for Bird Eye. And what are we doing to make sure that those homes are protected when we have these big fires come through, right? We don't need more of the Collin Ranch type situation where there's not a lot of ways for people to get in and out and there's a wildfire. So we are working with the state to kind of take the lead on that, and then we'll implement whatever they put into their regulations. All right, one more. Timing. So this has been something that would, initially when we adopted the code back in 2021, we said, we'll come back in 6 months and do a cleanup. So it's been 2 years and we are definitely overdue. This is a high priority for us on our team. And so our plan is to do a lot, again, 400 cleanup items that we are as staff working to fix, right? We're not working with a consultant on these 400 items. We're doing that in-house. The other items that we are working on with the consultant, we are just project managing that. All of these are going to require a public hearing process, not just planning commission, city council, but truly reaching out to the users of our zoning code, reaching out to the stakeholders, reaching out to the people like Steve Nevada that care about these things. So our intent is this summer to really work with some stakeholders, put together some red line documents to show what we're proposing during the fall, really take a hard look at putting comments back, not just from the internal stakeholders, but from the bigger City of Reno constituency, saying, how do you guys feel about these topics? And then trying to get something approved through planning commission and city council beginning of next year. And that is it. We good on time?
We're great. Thank you so very much. We do have 30 minutes left in our time today, so we do have time for question and answer. For those of you that are participating virtually online, if you do have a question, just place it in the chat box and I'll holler them out. But
On the timeline you have there,
Yes.
what's that includes those Point Smith stuff too with
It
the
does.
signs.
Yeah, so we heard the concerns. We've kind of kicked off some inputs in terms of they're dealing with signs, telecommunications, and appeals, right? Those three topics. So for signs in particular, we said, let's reach out to the sign industry. So we had a meeting with the billboard folks that own the billboards, and a meeting with folks like Yesco, right, the sign companies. And we didn't say, here's what we're proposing to change, because at this point, we're not proposing anything. We said, you tell us what works and what doesn't work. So they gave us some feedback. We also held a separate meeting with City of Reno and said, again, just those two topics, signs and telecommunications. What in our code do you like or not like? Just so we have some more input as we go into then starting to draft some red line documents.
Perfect. I think probably reached out to you, I think from the building industry about the fact that the code doesn't really allow any features. So you can't brand your community, you can't design any branding community whatsoever. You can have a sign that's probably 6 square feet on a rock,
Right.
which is not what our community deserves in terms of creating these trees. And so I think that's something that this industry, at least the home building industry, would like to see interest.
Do you have any sort of mailing list so that if someone wanted to follow this and just get buried with information that we could?
Yes. We do have what we're calling just kind of a stakeholder mailing list. And maybe we could even just create, for anyone that maybe is not part, like we'll send it to Dan, they'll send it to you guys, we'll send it to APA. But we have a separate kind of email list that we started just based on our last zoning code. So let's, Grace, do you want to just maybe hand out a piece of paper, name and email?
Actually,
And
we'll
we'll have
put
some-
that in our next newsletter too, if you want to, on that newsletter to go to.
Grace,
600.
we have a list of the signs that just up to the sign-in sheet.
Perfect, great.
And
And then separate from that, we are setting up a separate website within our City of Reno website where you can go and review every document. So as things are getting red lines, we're putting those out. We'll put that on our website as we have meetings, technical advisory committee meetings. We'll put that out so you can attend those things. We're trying to be just very transparent with this process. The intent is not to do any kind of major overhaul. We're still calling this a code cleanup. But some of these things are big topics. So we definitely want to make sure that everyone's involved and part of that.
Scott Carey first thanks you for a great presentation. His question is, what are some of the code changes the city is considering to promote affordable housing?
So the biggest ones are density, right? And allow more density. We currently have some density bonuses if you do affordable housing. So let's say you do a subsidized affordable housing, you're allowed to have more units. I think there's a max of 45% density bonus. We're saying, let's not put a max on that. You do affordable housing, no limit, sky's the limit. Now you're going to be capped by whatever your zoning district is in terms of height. So if you're limited to 35 feet in height, you can't put a whole lot of units in there just based on density. So that was one, is to allow for subsidized affordable housing, unlimited density. Another one was to go to a building permit and circumvent the public hearing process. One of the big concerns we've heard is time, money, and uncertainty. So if you have to go through a public hearing process to allow multifamily units for a conditional use permit, that's 3 months. It's a lot of time, it's a lot of money, and it's the chance that you're not going to get approved. So for affordable housing, we're saying circumvent that and go to a building permit process. I also think that with those residential compatibility requirements, again, it's going to help the neighbors feel more comfortable that we're not just throwing something, in their neighborhood that doesn't fit. We're going to have to try and find that medium balance of, yep, you're going to have 3 stories in your neighborhood, but you're going to have some protections of literally what's 5 feet from your window. So that was the second one. I'm trying to remember what the third one was. There was like 3 big ones. I will say too, with this legislative session, one of the huge topics is affordability. And it's not just subsidized affordable housing, it's the missing middle. So I'm anticipating come July 1st, we're going to have a whole list of things that local jurisdictions are going to have to implement as part of their regulations.
Angela.
There's a handful of bills, Angela, that are dealing with that. But you're absolutely right. That it
Yeah.
will- In July, the playing field will look a little bit different.
Yes.
You made a statement about council wants parkways. I think it was along the lines of what council priority parkways on all streets. Think about that. I know you know this,
Yeah.
but that's a huge issue to the cost of housing, right?
Yeah.
If we add 10 feet of right of way width, if you reference it to back a walk like we
Yeah.
typically do, Do you really want to do that for internal subdivision streets?
Right.
Where it's only the people that live there that really see that street. And so you're, and it's funny, the top of your list on the council priorities was affordable housing. So you're killing the cost of housing again. Somehow I hope we have a broad audience for input on that issue.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I love parkway strips. They're no question about the way they add character to a neighborhood, but there's a huge cost that goes with it. I know you know that.
No, that's very common.
And the other one is, this one is a big rub for the last 20 years. Think about, this room's highly qualified to really pin down what residential compatibility means, right? Political compatibility is something else, and it's the whim of a council person. And we need to strip them with all due respect of that authority, because there's times where we're so hard at ensuring compatibility with design standards, but we don't really have something tangible to say it's done. And I mean, you just referenced that. What was the project you said, the little townhome project? Where was that at?
Over by Idlewild Park.
They got shot down?
Yep.
Yeah. There you go, political compatibility.
It was a tentative map.
Yeah, so it was not a multifamily.
No,
Right.
so either way, they would have
Yeah.
triggered a public hearing.
By one unit.
Jeff, be good. Chief been waiting.
I'm fine.
I didn't see on there were ADUs. Is there any conversation about that? There has been conversations, but what's the status of those?
Yeah, and that kind of fell under the affordable housing category. We kind of have mixed messages, I think, on priorities from our council on ADUs. That is one, we will be hiring a consultant to help us draft that ordinance. I do think as part of the legislative session, we're gonna see some requirements for ADUs. So that may be bumped up the priority list. And it's funny, because which is much of the community supports ADUs, much of the community despises ADUs. That is a tough one. Nobody wants in their backyard, or their neighbors.
The council spoke very clearly a few years ago when they voted against it 6-1.
On that particular ordinance.
Yes.
Yes.
And that was one of the few, Penny Breakfast was the one. And that's one of the few times I thought she was totally right.
Like I said, it's a hot topic.
Angela, you mentioned, to address John's point of the parkway strips, that it was gonna be possibly Public Works Design Manual compatibility amendment. Is that saying that potentially taking it out of the zoning code and creating standards for street classification for the Public Works Design Manual would make sense and aren't all over the place?
Yeah, so kind of two things. So we're working on the code cleanup, and separate from that, Public Works is working on their design manual. So the idea is that those two would actually match. So for streets in particular, we have in our zoning code different standards for how wide streets have to be or how wide sidewalks have to be than the Public Works design manual. So we're working with them. They were working with us and the consultant on what makes sense. One of the things we struggle with too is what's considered like a local road versus a arterial road. Is that Reno standards or RTC standards or NDOT standards? So we're gonna make it easy. We're gonna actually have a list of all the city of Reno streets and their road classification. Years ago in our old master plan, we used to have this list of all the streets and what was classified as. And that's been gone since 2017. So we said, let's bring that back so that you can just go to this list and say, great, I'm on an arterial roadway. And then you can go to the zoning code. It says arterial roadways require a 6-foot sidewalk with a 6-foot parkway strip. And then you go to the Public Works Design Manual. It says, here's how wide your street has to be. So all of it should match. We're really, again, working with Public Works to make sure that their numbers match our numbers in terms of all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we've done quite a bit, I mean, to John's point, quite a bit of analysis on the parkway strips and wanting to add them to our communities and realizing that they serve to encroach in a category.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Area and or cause additional grading on hillsides or whatever the case may be. So we would love to be involved in those.
Another question online from Art Rangel. Please ask Angela to define which groups make up stakeholders.
Anyone that wants to participate can be a stakeholder. So like I said, what we'll do is different types of meetings. So when we get into the really technical stuff, We generally will reach out to the folks who have technical expertise, you know, the planners, the engineers, the landscape architects. A lot of times we have meetings with the general public and their eyes glaze over because they don't know technically why we're talking about these things. So big picture stuff, we're gonna have anyone can join stakeholder meetings. When we're talking about really specific, should this be 4 feet or 5 feet? We're going to start with the technical people and then take it out to the broader group.
Angela, just a question for you. During this process, have you guys reached out, and there's a really specific reason I'm asking this question. Have you guys reached out to like the utility companies and most specifically as it pertains to setbacks? Because we as builders and developers appreciate very much, you know, a shallower setback. However, as the Truckee Meadows developing here holistically, where density is increasing, we're getting closer to the streets, the utility companies are going, what in the hell are you people doing? And it's causing a whole lot of grief, you know, whether it's with Truckee Meadows Water Authority or if it's with NV Energy or what have you, trying to fit all of these utilities in these teeny little spots. I mean, so are they allowed a seat at the table, you know, to comment on this and maybe to provide guidance so that we don't get down the road and we sit at some point they go, now you have to put your water meters in the street. And we're like, wait, what? That's
Yeah, and then engineering said you can't put the water meters in the street. And we realized that everything we worked for 12 months didn't work.
right.
So,
Right. No, I think it's a great comment. I think a lot of those like PUEs, right, easements are 7.5 feet. Again, random numbers, 7.5 feet. But there's not always utilities in that easement. So a lot of times we rely on, you know, you do a survey and you figure out where your easements are. So if there's a sewer line there or a water line, hopefully your design team knows that, oh, we already have an easement there. We can't put the building at the 0-foot setback. We need to put it at the 7.5-foot setback because of easements. But we have not included them in a table, and we can definitely add them because I think that would be important.
That would be, and I mean, for us, we just came from a meeting at Commonwealth, and they, just so everybody in this room knows, are getting ready to change their standards again. And although I think the development community has asked for many moons to have copies of that,
Yeah.
like I'm not trying to be facetious, but it's speaking my truth, right, you guys, that we've asked that as you're getting ready to, you know, roll that out, please include the development community, let us weigh in. You know, and we all want to be fair. We all have the same end goal, but it's like, we all need a seat at that table to comment and not get blindsided by that class.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if you could include them, we would be grateful. So, thank you.
yeah, Danny and Mike, I think would have to check it.
Great. Other questions? Comments?
Rock
The
crushing.
throw.
The stockpile, is it including rock crushing in there,
We can.
please?
It's allowed on sites.
Yeah, Sparks did it. Their standards are great. They work out.
Yeah.
So did I hear you mention that even 300 feet away is too close for banging and crashing in the middle of the night in industrial? Did you say 300 feet a couple times?
So as an example, we've got a particular industrial development up in North Valleys that we get inundated with complaints. And it's 300 feet away, it's separated by a railroad track, right? All the things that we thought were good enough, turns out wasn't adequate.
When was that developed? Not trying to get,
Probably in the when it was approved, probably 1920-ish.
okay, so it's fairly new standards.
Yeah,
Hmm,
yeah.
surprised.
But I mean, you think about it, right? In North Valleys in particular, it's very quiet up there at night. And so any noise, whether it's a truck or a beeping, it's loud. Yeah. And so, I mean, we've also talked to some like acoustical engineers, right? The experts and said, what can we do to fix this? And they said so much of it is your building design. If you use the building as a buffer, that is one super easy, quick way to fix it. But that means that we have to tell you guys ahead of time through our zoning code that this is the standard. What we don't want you to do is put together a site plan and then come to us and say, no, I know it's not in our code, but we don't like it, right? We want to be able to say, this is the standard. so that your engineers and your architects can design it up front, knowing what the rules are. We all hate the fact that the uncertainty is the big one, right? You spend hundreds of thousands of dollars designing these buildings to have, some planner tell you they don't like it. That's not okay. You gotta have some standards that you can all review and live by and be okay with.
Hey, I understand that, I appreciate the, meeting today, and I understand that it's really broad, there's a lot of big ticket items on there, it's gonna be a long process. But from a school district perspective, some of the things that we're, interested in is the signs, telecommunications, as you know, the compatibility, I don't know if, you talked briefly about residential compatibility from an industrial standpoint, but obviously we're interested from a school standpoint. But yeah, we just appreciate it and we'd like to be at the table
Yes,
during the discussion, so.
we'll add you guys to the list. Okay, thank you guys so much. And like I said, this is kind of a kickoff. So we will be having a lot more input, meetings, website. We'll share all of that through our development services newsletter that Chris sends out every couple months. So be looking for that, and we encourage you to get involved. Thank you.
Another round of applause. Again, a huge shout out and thank you to the Builders Association of Northern Nevada and of course Aaron. And if you don't know already, Aaron's getting married in a little bit, so make sure that you slip her $100 as a again, much more in terms of planning and events and activities that the Northern section and band are planning. We'll give you all that information. There is still a ton of food, so please make sure you grab a sandwich on the way out. Jeff, anything else? Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.